a sort of boot camp, how to handle a gun and how to change magazine and how to stalk a building, go upstairs. One of the funny things was, though, that I had the commanding officer of this group was brilliant about helping me for authenticity in all this, and he would really want to know what I was doing, and he'd say, no, it's not professional, you must do this, no, keep your elbow in. And then we get to the scene where I'm shooting the fight scene between Jerry and myself, and I knew I had this problem that Coriolanus and Fienes have to fight early in the film. Well, they've got machine guns, so if they could shoot each other dead, then the story would stop. I had to contrive a knife fight which was not fatal to either of them. And my idea was that you'd have this battle, and Coriolanus leads his men into this sort of fucked up building, and in the mist and in the smoke, Fienes emerges with his gun down. Coriolanus sees it as a sort of challenge, as an offering, like, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to, and immediately gets it. And then they eyeball each other, and other men emerge from the smoke. When I was trying to explain this to Vladon, the commanding officer of SAG, so I come around the corner, and I see his gun is down, and then I see that I know he's thinking something else, and I drop my gun. He said, no, now you're making movie.
Now, the fact that this is a contemporary setting, and that I think some of the imagery cannot but give us images of Iraq, of military incursion that is closer to our time than Shakespeare's, and because you mentioned Barry a few minutes ago, your DP, Barry Ackroyd, also shot The Hurt Locker, in which you played a role. So I'm curious, how much of an inspiration was Catherine Bigelow's film to you, at least in terms of the visual aspect of the film?
Well, it was, I guess, a strong reference, because it was a very recent, successful war film where one felt the kind of immediacy of violence, and Barry was responsible for a lot of that with Catherine. I wanted it to feel immediate and real, and Hurt Locker was a fantastic reference for that. I met Barry on Hurt Locker. I just did 2 days on it, but then asked him to meet me about Coriolanus. But the thing about Barry is he doesn't just do that. He comes from a documentary background, and he can do those war things. I wouldn't say effortlessly, but he's immediately at home in that sort of filming environment. And he's got an extraordinary instinct for what's happening in the moment. He will sense that something's happening. He's had the camera there, and he will just sense, and he'll catch stuff that another person would never have caught. But also, he's worked with Ken Loach a lot, which is a completely different kind of filmmaking. Very, very still, very considered, and I needed that as well for some of these quite extensive, extended dialogue scenes. So I needed both, and also he shoots very fast, and I knew we were challenged for time, so we had 4 days to shoot most of that battle at the beginning of the film. So we just couldn't hang around. So he as a D, he operates too, so he's right in there. We did a lot of preparation. We walked the locations again and again and again. But actually, it was extraordinary, because that was my first day. My first 4 days directing was the battle scene. But we got, thanks to Barry. I mean, I didn't, you do as much preparation as you can, and then the day begins, and you go, right, the soldiers are coming down there, and the car explodes, and then Barry gets it. He gets it. He's there. He's extraordinary. He knows where to put the camera. Again, from documentary, and he says from years and years in documentary, you develop an instinct and skill where you've got to be, because you only have one chance when you're shooting a documentary. Something's unfolding in front of you. What's the optimum place to put your camera?
And I think, as in Hurt Locker, both films become this kind of real questioning of heroism and of violence, precisely because the handheld camera gives you this rush of adrenaline whenever there's something violent happening in the street, but both films, I think, really question the limitations of male identity in a violent world, and for me, they're a fascinating combination. I mean, I've heard from directors, actors who are making their first film, that they need sometimes to have a second pair of eyes, especially in scenes where they're on camera. Was Barry Ackroyd that, or did you have someone else? Was it John Logan, your screenwriter? Who did you trust when you were in front of the camera and couldn't necessarily see the totality?
Well, I absolutely needed someone to give me, uncompromising critical feedback about my own performance. And I used a brilliant woman she's called Joan Washington, and she's known principally as a dialect coach. And she was there also to oversee the speaking of the text, and clarity was very important to this. Things were spoken clearly, and we had actors who were not native English speakers speaking Shakespeare, so that was another challenge. She also was there to literally give me critical feedback about my own performance, and alongside wonderful producers that I had, and a wonderful script supervisor, Susanna Lenton, who I'd worked with on The Reader and The Constant Gardener, who also has a great eye for what's a good take or what something isn't quite gelling. And sometimes it was tough, because Joan is tough. But she was there to go. Sometimes I made a wrong call about a choice, an acting choice. She was there to go, are you sure that's right? I think you should do the opposite.
You need that. And since you're as much a stage actor as a film actor, I'm going to ask you about rehearsal. Did you get to do a fair amount the way sometimes you can in
theatre? I would love to. Well, it's a funny thing about rehearsing for film. I think it's useful sometimes. I mean, different directors have different views on it. I would like to have rehearsed for a week. I couldn't because of scheduling and actors coming in literally a day or two before they were starting to shoot in the schedule. So we rehearsed at weekends, and we rehearsed where we could in locations. But often I think rehearsals, my feeling is that in film, often, but not always, you don't want to over-rehearse. You want to save it for the day. And that rehearsals are useful for just discussing the parameters, the structure of a scene, and actually for actors to know each other, because the pressure on the day on a set is, it can wrong foot people, and adrenaline is high, and anxiety is high, and so the relaxed atmosphere of rehearsal, where there's no cameras, just talk, discussion, go through the lines, gently sort of push to where you might be emotionally, and actors can hear each other and build up trust. I think that's, for me, the key benefit is not about nailing the performance in the rehearsal.
You've worked with some of the greatest directors in the world, and I'm curious if there were particular ones who played the greatest role in helping you direct your first feature, just from what you've learned on the set. I mean, some of them are better known, like Anthony Minghella and Steven Spielberg and David Cronenberg, and some slightly less known, Julian Armstrong. Or I'm just curious, and Fernando Meirelles, who I think did a great job in The Constant Gardener. Was there something that you remembered from the best of them that you brought into this film?
I think Anthony Minghella was very present in my head. He had one of the best vocabularies for knowing how to talk to an actor, to nurture an actor, and he was collaborative with his crew, truly collaborative. And so his gentleness and his sort of quiet tenacity, I think I remembered that. And also Fernando too, actually, was very gently just pushing for the always looking for this weird thing called the truth. The truth of something. And I'd say Vanessa led the way a lot. I think we were all inspired. You can't help but be inspired by her always pushing for where is a line coming from, what is it doing, and so I think someone like Fernando or Anthony, as directors, are also wanting always to see where can something go. And the actor can give a very good first take that is clear and real and everything, but in the short time that you have, what else can you find that you hadn't thought about? And Anthony was very much like, I've written this, he would say, and you're saying this line in a different way to what I imagined. That's great, maybe push it this way. But also when I wrote it, I did hear it like this. Could you also do it like that?
I'm guessing another one would be Istvan Sabo, because I think one of the greatest jobs that you've done in film was Sunshine.
Oh, he's fantastic.
And I gather he's a very sort of nurturing...
Well, Istvan can be quite scary and very nurturing at the same time. He combines the two. He's very big on not rehearsing too much. He would say, now we rehearse, but please, only technically. And he was very. He's very hard to please, and he had lots of close-ups which he had very much mapped out in his screenplay. There is, now we have this moment where you are seeing this transformation. She tells you she's pregnant, and we see in your face, oh my God, what do I do? And he'd have these key close-ups, and so usually occasionally one might get it, but unlikely on the first take sometimes. And after a first take, usually you would hear him say, yes, cut, yes, nice, fine, prepared emotions. Very good, yeah. But then when you go, yes, fine, we have it, no, cut, moving on, yeah, fine.
Now, I know how busy you are as an actor. I was just hearing about how you are also in the next James Bond film, Skyfall, directed by Sam Mendes. One of the screenwriters is John Logan, who wrote the screenplay of this film. But my real question is, despite the busy schedule, will you direct again? In other words, was the experience of making Coriolanus sufficiently gratifying that you're ready now to have two identities at least?
No, I'd love to direct again. I mean, I love working alongside an amazing crew and to create a world and to be telling a story. And I think everything that you might imagine that is the best of making the film, I was lucky enough to engage with an amazing people, an amazing crew with fantastic artistry and skill. And the great thing is to have that collective wish to make something, and to be in the privileged position of leading it and I suppose deciding key things. But really, you can't. It's as good as the people you work alongside. But it was an amazing and exhilarating experience. Sometimes very scary. And the biggest learning curve, I think, for me was editing. Because I'd never been on film sets many times. But the editing process was very scary to begin with. You look at all this bits of footage that is meant to be your film, and it looks awful. But thanks to a great editor who put stuff together. And then he put it together, and then it looks, at first sight, think, it's working. Well, that's not bad, but that's okay, good. And then you think, no, something's... It took me a while to see, I see this is only infinite choices. And also to have the confidence, if you were, in this case, a very good, skilled editor who's highly thoughtful about what he was doing, to then, for me to find the sort of courage, I suppose, to go, no, actually, I think it should be this, or what I imagined when I was filming it and directing the scene was this, and this, and it's not quite there, and then you get into a dialogue, and it was a big learning curve. And I think they say, don't they, that directors, the film is never finished. There's a point where the money runs out, and you just have to long.
Also, in terms of the editing, one of the things I found so powerful about this film is the soundtrack, the score, this percussive, tribal, pounding music. How did you work with the composer Ilan Eshkeri? Was the music done afterwards? Was it composed to some extent during filming?
No, it was all done afterwards. It was the one thing that I don't like music in films which tells me what I should feel, what emotions I'm meant to be having. and I was very wary about what music would be in this. I thought, well, I think there will be places where there will be music. And the only thing that I could feel was that it was propulsive or percussive. It was to do with a beat. And when I met Ilan, I listened to some music he'd done for other films, really liked it, and he tried out some pieces for some scenes, and it was fantastic. And then I asked him to do it, and then we went through the film, and maybe he chose about 40 places in the film that he thought could be scored. I went there going, no music. But then it was a great discussion. Eventually, we settled on the places where. But I think mostly it's mostly about movement forward. It's propulsion. It's a beat. It's a heartbeat. It's drumming. There's a trumpet in there, but mostly there's hardly any strong melodic line at all, and that's quite deliberate. And certainly, I didn't want, except for the Theodorakis song at the end, which is a lament. I was very clear. I wanted a lament at the end. That is a lament. It's a Greek song. But I felt that was how I wanted. The last thing you heard was a woman's voice singing unaccompanied a lament.
It's a very effective way to end it, especially after all the male violence, to have a female voice. I see one question right there. We have time for just a few, but the gentleman here, and then I'll come down here.
What was really stunning for me was the close-ups and the contemporary language made it a very intimate film with Greek passion. I mean, the relationships became less Shakespearean theatrically as to Greek passion, but intimate because of the cinematography. The male relationship, the bonding between these two lovers, rivals, was so intimate and so delicate and so male. Could you talk about how you and Jerry worked that through?
Could you hear the question in the back? No. Okay, just briefly, the close-ups made not just Shakespearean language, but the intimacy of the close-ups made him think of the Greek passion. In other words, that it was Greek theater, even more than the Shakespearean. Could he talk about working with Jerry Butler for the scenes where the two men have this almost lover
Greek male love. No, I mean, that's what it is. I think there's no question that there is meant to be in this text of Shakespeare's a homoerotic element. That it needn't be conscious in the minds of Ophidius and Coriolanus, but this extraordinary attraction of enemies, that warriors who want to be each other, even at the same time that they want to destroy each other. The first stage in that relationship was the fight. I wanted the fight to be, it became a locked embrace very quickly, and that's very much a lot of, I thought of some of these Francis Bacon paintings of men coupling, and that was fed into this sort of this held embrace in the fight scene. But more importantly, the central key moment, I think, is the arrival of Coriolanus in the Volscian headquarters, or in Antium. And Jerry found this wonderful. Coriolanus has quite a sort of formal declaration of intent, but Ophidius responds with this amazing. He says, "Let me twine mine arms about that body. Know thou first, I loved the maid I married. Never man sighed truer breath. But that I see thee here, thou noble thing, more dances my rapt heart than when I first my wedded mistress saw bestride my threshold." And I think I love Jerry's. It's very delicate and it's whispered and it's very, very subtle. It is sometimes a line. I know from doing it on stage. The sort of romantic element, the lover's quality in the speech can get a laugh. I hope you didn't laugh. No, but I think it is really intimate, and I think Ophidius is it's as close to a sort of declaration of love. And then you see the anger in Ophidius at the end, I think, is the anger of the betrayed lover.
I'll repeat because I'm not sure how to do this. I can.
Well, thank you for spending your time with us, and wonderful job on the film. Thank you. Throughout this film, very often I see like this emotion in your face. There's this conflicting emotion that at the beginning of the film, whether you're fighting for your country and your countrymen hate you, or at the end of the film where you're attacking your own country and your mother, wife, and son coming and begging you for mercy. So I see that conflict, like conflicting in your face. You know, as an actor, what kind of technique, what do you do to carry out that emotions?
Well, it's very hard, isn't it, to talk about. I mean, every actor's technique is so personal to them, and sometimes it's to do with things that's very hard to articulate. There has to be some. I think for me, I have to find some base point of emotion, whatever it is. In this case, I think there's. I've never really analysed it, but I think it's a lot to do with sort of compacted emotion in Coriolanus. I think that there is a deep-seated rage to do with the sort of frustration and being conditioned actually never to. That compassion has never been part of Volumnia's agenda. I think the first point of entry into Coriolanus for me was this permanent presence of rage and anger, which of course can flower in the field of battle to a point of ecstasy. But in the opening scenes, there's this point of the tension, because the rage is held. And rage is often to do with wounding, a kind of wounding in someone. But I don't know what the technique is, to be honest. It's you. I know when it's not there, and I think it's about. And I think to be honest, it's a continual discovery for me as an actor. Often I feel I have trouble getting to an emotional place. It's often a challenge for me. But I think probably I seem to be able to access rage.
We'll try. Yes, over here.
Yes. My biggest thing is in this kind of climate right now with Marvel superheroes not even being able to make money, how did you sell this? I mean, you're more comfortable here as an actor. I went to the PGA screening and it was very different. How did you sell this idea, this really hard text?
How did you sell the idea of this really hard text as a film?
I had to see it twice to make it fully make sense. And, I'm not a half-wit. So, I mean, how did you make the powers that be distribute this film, get on board with you?
No.
Somebody whispered.
No, it was extremely difficult, and a lot of powers that be did not get on board. I pitched it in Cannes, 2008. I had a mood reel of imagery and bits of voiceover. I managed to get Vanessa to put some lines down. It was one of the toughest things I've ever done, which is to basically audition the film before it's made to these tough distributors at the Cannes Film Festival. They might have had a degree of respect for my work as an actor, but they were not going to be at all impressed. I mean, they were sort of, well, tell us, what is it? Prove it. Of course, I couldn't prove it because I hadn't made it. But it was, it was a tough sell, no question. Shakespeare, not a very well-known Shakespeare, a protagonist that sort of challenges you to like him at all. I can't find any point of empathy, which I don't mind. But for distributors, it matters that people are going to like the guy. No, it was tough. Some people, we did sell some territories on that, only a handful. And then we managed to put together finance against the odds, some equity out of Serbia, and the BBC put in some money, and there was some gap finance out of the UK. But it was very tricky. We got enough to make it. And then once we Lionsgate UK, British, the Lionsgate in the UK did buy it. They got it very cheap. But they did buy it, and now they're very happy. But no, it wasn't until we had a finished film that people, we took a risk, and so people were not running to back it and now it's been made, and we've pretty much sold it worldwide except for 2 territories, I think.
Sometimes the limitations define the possibilities. We're going to have to end, but I do want to say one thing. I got an email from my colleague at Columbia University, James Shapiro. He's the scholar of Shakespeare who a few weeks ago had a New York Times op-ed piece where he lambasted Anonymous. And I invited him to a screening, and he told me he'd seen it already. He said, "This film is brilliant, the best adaptation of Shakespeare I've seen."
Thank you for coming.